This video walks you through the Chapter 4 practice pivot tables exercise. So here's the file, Chapter 4 pivot table practice, and I'm going to save it as Chapter 4 practice last name. There's my new file name. So the information on page 1 and 2 and a little bit of 3 is just information about how to do pivot tables, and there's nothing wrong with how they do it in the book. I just think it's a lot easier than the way they showed you, so I want to show you the easy way to do pivot tables. So first thing I want to do is make a range name out of the list, and this is a data list, same as we did with sort and filter and subtotals. Consecutive information in columns and rows, no blank columns, no blank rows. I'm going to make it a range name of data list because that's a common Excel term. So to create a pivot table, first I choose my range name, which selects my entire list, and then go to Insert, Pivot Table. This should be correct, so it should be the sheet name and the information in the selected range. So it should be datasheet A3 through F35. Usually you want to create the pivot table in a new worksheet so that the data list stays the same, and hit OK. So on page 3 in the directions, I'm going to start creating the first pivot table. So to create pivot table A, I'm going to have state in rows. So this gives me my list of all my unique values from my data sheet. Group, dog show, breed, state, weight, and ribbons. Group, dog show, breed, state, weight, and ribbons. If I want to see state, I click on state, automatically puts it in the rows area. If I click on dog show, it also automatically puts that in the row area. So by default, everything you click on shows up in the rows area, except for anything that's a value, and that will show up in the values area by default. And I'm going to click on ribbons, and it shows up in values. If I want to move dog show into columns, the easiest thing to do is click on dog show, move it into columns, and you see this horizontal green line, and that's how you know where it's going. So my state is in rows, my dog show is in columns, and my ribbons are sum, which is the totals. And there's my state in rows, there's my dog shows in columns, and these values are all my values from ribbons. Change all your sheet names so they reflect whichever sheet you're on. And this is pivot table A. To create pivot table B, I go back to my data sheet because everything's going to start with the data sheet. And my data list is selected. Go to Insert, go to Pivot Table. This is right, so I'm just going to hit OK. Make sheet 2. I'm going to call this pivot table B. And then I go to my list again, and I want breed in rows, state in columns, ribbons in value area. And if I want state to be in columns, I just click and drag it to the columns area. So now breed in rows, state in columns, sum of ribbons. There's my breeds in rows, there's my states in columns. This is very similar to what we did in pivot table A. I want to make pivot table C, so I go back to my data sheet, my range is selected, insert pivot table. This is all good, hit OK. I'm going to call this pivot table C. This time I'm going to display group in rows and then breed in rows. And notice when I click on multiple, they just put them one underneath each other. And what this will do is it'll have the groups, then within the groups it has all the breeds. So I have the herding group and then the breeds under group, hound group, breeds under hound. So make sure that they're in the right order. I don't want breed first and then group. I want the higher level category on top. So if it was states, I'd have state on top and then city underneath. So I want group first, then breeds, and then I want state, and I want to move that to columns, and I want ribbons, which is up over here. Now another thing I can do in ribbons, and this is different than how they did it in the book, is if I want to change this from sum of ribbons, which is the default, to average of ribbons, I click on the down arrow for ribbons, or that whatever the value category is, click on value field settings, and then it gives me different calculations. So I can do sum, count, average, max, min, etc. So if I want average, I click on average and hit OK. And then I get the average of the ribbons instead of the sum or the total of the ribbons. And if I don't like how this is displaying with lots of decimals, I click on the down arrow again for average of ribbons, value field settings again. This time click on number format. I could have done this the first time, but I wanted you to see that it shows up with lots of different decimals if you don't format it. Number format, I want this to be a number format, and I'm going to turn on use thousand separators in case I had any numbers over 999, and I want 2 decimals, and hit OK, and hit OK again. So then all my averages, shows up average here, show up as number format with 2 decimals. Now for pivot table D, this is on page 8, back in my data sheet, range is selected, insert pivot table, this is good, hit OK. This time I want state in rows, dog show in columns, ribbons and values. So I'm going to move dog show over to columns. What I want to do this time is have a filter. And what a filter will do is instead of showing me everybody for dog show and state and keeping track of ribbons, I can say I only want dogs who are in the weight of 100-pound category. So to do that, click on weight. It automatically moves weight down to values because it's a numeric field, and then drag weight up to filters, and now I have weight in A1 and B1. So to filter this, I click on the down arrow for weight, and it gives me a list of all the unique values, and I want to see 100-pound dogs, so I click on 100 and hit OK. So now I have weight of 100, sum of ribbons, and then I only get these two entries. Data sheet name, and then before you upload it, you want to make sure these are in order, so I'm going to put data sheet first, and then I have pivot table A, B, C, and D. So pivot tables are actually really easy, and usually you want a different pivot table on each page because then when you give it to someone, you can just say, here's the information that you want. It does not change any of the original data. So that's Reader's Digest version of pivot tables. Thanks.